Doug, thanks so much for taking some time for us. Can you briefly remind our viewers what happened to Stacy DeBungee and how we got to this Police Act hearing?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dennis. Well, this Police Act hearing is basically 7 years in the making. It stems from October 19th, 2015, when a passerby notified the Thunder Bay Police Service that there was a body in the McIntyre River. The police responded, set up a scene, obviously, and then where the Police Service Act hearing comes into play is the family of Brad DeBungee and Rainy River First Nation, his home community, started to raise questions about how the investigation was being handled by the Thunder Bay Police Service, and that ultimately resulted in Police Service Act charges for two of the officers involved.
We heard over the past 2 weeks from Stacy's brother, Brad, the private investigator that the family had hired, the officers facing the charges and others. What stood out for you during the first 2 weeks of testimony?
Well, in the early stages, I think the testimony from former Rainy River First Nation Chief Jim Leonard, as well as Stacy's brother Brad, really started to set the tone for what they were experiencing at the time. Chief Leonard described it as, a really gut-wrenching experience for the family and for the community. And for Brad DeBungee, he went into more detail about his experiences with the police, wanting to get answers about what happened to his brother, and he felt that his questions and his inquiries were sort of brushed off by the police. As a result of that, the DeBungee family actually hired a private investigator out of Toronto, David Perry, and he testified as well. And he was in the city of Thunder Bay and conducted an investigation for 3 days, and he uncovered certain leads that would, sort of open the door for this to be a suspicious death. And then there was also testimony, obviously, from the two officers, Staff Sergeant Sean Harrison and Detective Sean Whipple. Harrison has already pleaded guilty to the charge of neglect of duty, but he pleaded not guilty to the other charge of discreditable conduct, and Whipple, who was charged with the same offenses under the Police Services Act, has pleaded guilty to both charges. And the reason Harrison pleaded guilty to the neglect of duty charge is because in November, Brad DeBungee and the private investigator, Dave Perry, attended the Thunder Bay Police Service headquarters and requested to meet with Harrison so Perry could share some of the new information he had uncovered. One of the most pressing details was that Stacy DeBungee's debit card had been used after his death. Mm-hmm. But Harrison did not take that meeting, and he met with Brad separately a couple weeks later and learned that the DeBungee family had hired a private investigator, but he still didn't follow up with that investigator. And he admitted in his testimony that was a mistake on his part and constitutes neglect of duty.
This testimony has wrapped up. Things will pick up, though, next week. What more can we expect?
The next stages will be closing submission on the part of all counsel, and then the adjudicator, retired Ontario Provincial Police Officer Greg Walton, will come down with his decision. It's just interesting to note as well that the DeBungee case was really sort of the jumping off point for the Office of the Independent Police Review Director's investigation into the Thunder Bay Police Service that found systemic racism at the institutional level. Mm-hmm. And during testimony, both Harrison and Whipple were asked if they had read that report, and both of them said they had not. They agreed that there are issues at the institutional level. There are systemic issues. They just don't know specifically what those refer to. And there was an interesting point where Prosecutor Joel Dubois had said that if you read those reports, you would know what some of those examples are. But Harrison and Whipple were also asked several times by their defense counsel, David Butt, about or if racial bias plays any kind of role in the investigations that they do. And they testified that it never has for them. And they even take great pride in the work that they do for the Thunder Bay Police Service and working with the Indigenous community.
Important case for sure. I won't press you on this, but I found it interesting watching myself that the adjudicator hadn't read the broken trust report until after the first week either. Doug, we'll all be watching, of course, next week. Appreciate you taking some time for us.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, Dennis.